Okay.
Recording and muting myself.
Okay. So this presentation is going to be about how I use Slack to keep seminar discussions going during HyFlex instruction. And I'm struggling a little bit these days with how to do really good virtual presentations. So I'm trying something new here where instead of having a PowerPoint or Google Slides and I have my notes elsewhere, I just put everything into the same document. So that link is in the chat if you want to have it on your own screen and control the sizing and things like that. My contact information is right there at the top. If you want to tweet this, I'm at Hancock Nikki, but my email is Nicole. Yeah. So a little bit of background. I have been using seminar instruction as part of my English 101 pedagogy ever since we started doing learning communities way back in the day. It was a retention issue, trying to help students have more community in the classroom and at the college. And so the Evergreen State College people came in, trained us on how to do seminar instruction in our classes. And even though the grant funding kind of disappeared for learning communities, I kept the seminar instruction even when I stopped doing learning community teaching. So as part of the seminars, students are always assigned some reading ahead of time. And my current class is themed on superheroes, and I create all of the materials myself, just assembling things from online readings. And so I often have a folder that has 5 readings in them. Students have to choose which 3 of the 5 they want to read, and they have to write approximately 400 to 600 words of their thoughts on those articles before coming to the seminar day. And the only rule on that is they can't write a summary of the articles because we've all read the same things. It needs to be their distinct thoughts. So in the old school pre-pandemic way of doing seminars, I would have students sit around the table. So half the students at a time would sit around the table in the center of the room and participate in a classroom discussion that was graded. And the other half would be outside of the fishbowl, just listening. And then halfway through the class, those 2 groups would switch. And again, I'd grade them on their participation in that discussion. The goal of the seminar, both pre-pandemic and post, well, not that we're post-pandemic, but you know what I mean. The goal was to really, really test out all of their ideas on a real audience of peers who had done similar reading on the same topic. So they get to see kind of which ideas people might be resistant to, and that gives them an audience. They also see a lot of the times which ideas everybody shares. So that might be an overdone topic. And anyhow, they work really, really well. And so I wanted to keep them. But there were some problems with the old way where I didn't necessarily want to keep this style forever. So if students were absent, they missed out on this really, really good activity, and they were unable to make up that graded thing for their grades. The class discussions were also often a very ableist activity. In particular, my neurodivergent students and some of the students with physical disabilities, like when I had a student who relied on sign language interpreting, it was a lot to deal with within the context of a graded activity. I also almost always had at least one student a section who wanted to dominate the conversation so they could maximize their points. Like somehow they were going to get more than 10 points on this activity. And so I always had to struggle to kind of tamp that down a bit because it would keep other people from participating. And then I also had, as we all do, some students who had amazing ideas in their seminar papers, but for whatever possible reasons, they didn't share them during the seminar. So I'd grade their paper, read it, and be like, oh, this was great. But they wouldn't talk within the seminar. So even with those problems though, seminars, I'm a big fan. They provide students with newer, stronger, more interesting paper topics that come from their own beliefs and interests. So instead of students choosing very, very top safe or overdone topics, they would choose things that were a little bit outside of the norm. I wouldn't get every single paper on exactly the same topic. And even when I do, the papers tend to have their own different types of support. As I said earlier, it gave students a better sense of audience as well, because they'd heard some pushback or some thoughts about that within the seminar. And they seem to get, okay, I need to write this as a real person to a real person. And the last thing, which is also super important, is it deflected attention from me back to the students. During a seminar, I do not participate. Gotta be honest, this is a struggle for me. So it's very easy for me to, oh, I want to say something about this too. But in the seminar space, that is student space, and it's all equalized. They are all equally valid with things to contribute because they've all done some reading and preparation in advance. And it helps them really start writing papers in a way that it's more directed to a common student audience instead of to an instructor audience. So it does break students out of that mold of, I have to write a paper that is what the teacher wants. Which, again, if we've been teaching English 101 at the community college for any amount of time, this is super important to our own sanity with grading a million papers. So, of course, COVID comes in and we've got to have major pedagogical adjustments. It hit when I was not actually teaching English 101 that semester, so I didn't have to triage it in the moment. I had over the summer to think about what I wanted to do because I was teaching at least 3 sections of it in fall 2020. So I knew looking ahead that I wanted to keep that community building and the effective pre-writing nature of our seminars. And I really, really liked my class assignment calendar structure. That had been working for me for a long time, and I didn't want to have to change everything, right? So, but it was HyFlex, which meant I just only knew going in, I would have at most half the students in the room at one time and half the students attending remotely at the same time. So I needed a space where students could be in the same space, even when they weren't physically in the same space. My college used Teams. I have a lot to say on that, but for the purpose of keeping this moving, I will move right along. That is a picture of my current classroom this semester. So you see how usually we could have those tables in the center of the room form one large table. During the HyFlex semester, there were times where I had at most 2, maybe 3 students in the room with me, and everybody else was on Teams. So I couldn't know ahead of time how many would show up for sure. But what ended up happening is I taught most of the time to a Teams square of faceless video. So because of bandwidth issues. What I did know going in was I had been using something called Slack for a PhD accountability group that I'm in. And I found it super easy to learn and so convenient to access on my phone. So this is the video that I show to my students when I'm introducing it to them in the classroom.
Messaging platform. Let's take a quick tour starting with the sidebar. You can use the sidebar to access the channels you choose to follow and see your direct messages. When a channel name is bold, it means you have unread messages in it. When you see a badge, someone has mentioned you and needs your attention. And when you want to write messages for any conversation, you can use the compose button. Next, let's see what's happening in this channel, which is a dedicated space for a social media project. You can see the number of people in this channel. To find out who, you could click here. The team has been sending messages and sharing files in this channel. They've also added one-click responses to messages with emoji reactions. For example, Lisa added the checkmark reaction to let Harry and the team know she was done reviewing this file. Now, let's take a look at the variety of messaging options you have when working in Slack. You can bold text, add lists, and loop in teammates by mentioning them to get their attention. You can also attach files so that they stay together with the rest of the conversation. And unlike email, you can edit or delete a message you've already sent. Great for typos. And there you have it, a quick start guide to Slack. If you need help or more information about Slack, you can find it here. Welcome.
Okay, so that is literally the only thing that I show students before getting them started on Slack, and it is sufficient. So students who have used Discord find it looks remarkably similar. And I often tell students before we get started on Slack that it's just a more professional version of Discord, and they get it. So this is what Discord looks like. Sorry for the blurry screenshot, but you see that the setup and the setup for Slack remarkably similar. Now, you might ask, and I have had people ask, why do you use Slack if there are more people that are familiar with Discord? And at least my experience is students are much more familiar with Discord. They're already on it. And the reason I don't use it is because they're already on it. So one, Discord is what many of our students, especially during the pandemic, are using to talk to their friends. It's their back channel for school stuff. It's also what they do if they're into gaming. It really is their social world. And I've got 3 teenagers at home, and my kids even send each other messages on Slack from within the same house. I mean, within Discord from within our same house. I'll be like, okay, what do you want me to pick up for fast food? And oh, okay, I'll get to them on Discord. So what I knew from their experience is that people can see when you're online, when you're on Discord, and it sends a message that you're available for whatever. So you're available for whatever level of contact. I did not want my students' school world and social worlds colliding in that way. I didn't want them to be in the middle of a school activity and one of their online friends sees that they're on and starts contacting them to start a game. So Slack for me has all the benefits of student familiarity with Discord without causing them to get distracted by it. It also allows students to sign up using a pre-existing Google account. And I'm a Google girl, okay? I love using Google Drive in my classroom. So I've already introduced students to use of Google Drive before we get with Slack. So they're able to just sign in with that account they already have. It's not one more username and password that they have to keep track of, which also really minimizes a lot of student eval complaints about, well, we had to juggle all of these things. It doesn't really feel like a separate thing when there's not another username or sign in. All right, so during the HyFlex semester, students had so many more benefits with Slack beyond what was just going on in seminar. So this is going to be the next part of my presentation is on how it really built community beyond what I was expecting. Then later, I'm going to get into a little bit of what's happening now with the current, we're all face-to-face, no longer in the HyFlex environment. So within Slack, you saw that presentation, they have different channels. So I had 3 in all of my Slack spaces, and I did a separate Slack space for each section of English 101 that I was teaching. So each section had these channels. General and random are default and will come up whenever you create a Slack space. And then I created a third one for seminar discussions where only seminar discussions would take place within that channel. So I told them I would reserve the general channel for any class announcements and reminders. And so one of the things that I do is I dismiss class for a whole week so that I can conference with each student for 10 minutes. And even though the conference schedule is posted in Blackboard and they have easy access to it, of course, they always contact me. Can I switch my conference, or when is my conference again? And I'll tell them, go to the link. Well, in Slack, I can post the link to the Google Drive document super, super easily, just to remind them, hey, if you need to change it, go here, do that. I also would remind them of homework assignments if it was something that students seem to be forgetting about. And I know some people use things like Remind for that. This for me just had everything built in together. If I had received multiple emails on the same question, I would post something in Slack just on the off chance that students were checking it and would see it. So I have in here, maybe you're thinking, I already have a CMS for this, for all of these things. I do too, but I don't go in to check Blackboard unless I have to. And I think that our students are much the same way. Meanwhile, like my students, I'm on my phone a little too much, right? And Slack is so easy on my phone. And it also has push notifications that will come to me. So if students had it so that the general channel was not muted, those announcements would come through to them in real life on their phone. But they also have the option to mute it as well. So it felt less intrusive and more intuitive in a lot of ways. And yeah, so the other part of this is when I'm using Blackboard and I want to post an announcement, that is I have to do this on the computer, not on my phone activity. And it is a multiple click sort of thing to make an announcement. And then I have to go back out of that course into another course, do multiple clicks, multiple steps. In Slack, it is as easy as posting the announcement in one Slack space, holding my finger down and copying that message, then going over to another space, pasting, send, boom, not multiple clickety clicks. So I also found that students could respond to what I had posted, and they actually did. And Slack reaction buttons are fun. Blackboard's not fun. So do I need a hypercolor parrot or a dancing guinea pig as a reaction button? Probably not, but guys, I use them. I love them. And more importantly, students are actually using them. They send me little check marks or hearts or smiley faces to show that they've heard my message and appreciate it. When we're doing seminars, they'll put, the 100 or praise hands, or they'll say this message was fire. And even though those reactions don't count toward their graded participation, they're using them. It's helpful to them to kind of shortcut this. This is, oops, sorry about that. These are Slack's reactions. These are in the professional account, but some of them do come up. That right there is the little dancing guinea pig, and it really is like dancing and moving when you put it. This hypercolor parrot wiggles his head like this, right? And then there's just a whole bunch of normal things like the heart eyes, a smiley face, chef's kiss, etc. There are more reactions than you could possibly use in Slack. I've actually tried experimenting with trying lots of different ones. So in addition to these things, Slack, it also makes it super easy to share images and links, much easier than in a clunky CMS discussion board. Conversations thread in a very natural manner that feels intuitive to students. And then the ability to @ somebody so that you can flag them and they see it is also very helpful. During our very difficult HyFlex semesters, I think y'all are with me on this, very difficult HyFlex semesters, this Slack space really became our shared human space. This is where students could admit that they'd forgotten something or were confused by an assignment. They could post questions and get reaffirmation. And for whatever reason, they were so much more comfortable doing it in the Slack space than emailing me. So they felt email was somehow an intrusion into my life and Slack wasn't. So they would post more things there. The random channel, it was more used by some sections than by others, but that became a space where students could share memes or songs or pictures of their pets, things that were not strictly related to class activities, but had in some way been inspired by something that was said in class. So sometimes the memes would show up during class time, and sometimes they would show up after class time. But I even had students who were sharing things on the weekend when they just thought of class and were maybe a little bit lonely because they were just stuck at home. I am not a super touchy-feely kind of teacher, but I even posted some random, some pep talks in that random area. I even shared, there was one song that came across my radar and I was like, oh, I bet this is exactly how students feel. And I posted it and got a whole bunch of reactions on the weekend. So students could also post messages that requested more peer review in that general channel. And so I had students who were sharing their Google Drive papers through that general area and doing peer review above and beyond what was required in class, because maybe they didn't get enough feedback in the previous peer review or whatever. So the community of learners that I wished to establish via seminars really flourished on this Slack space. So that was HyFlex 2 semesters in a row. This fall, we have this return to normal. I'm back in the classroom. I have 20 students all masked up in that space. And I really struggled with trying to, first of all, fit 20 students into that space because it's pretty packed, and how much I wanted to do discussion and group work and things like that while we're still in a pandemic. But I decided I'm going to keep Slack again this semester. How could I not when it had been going so well? What I have found is the community is not the same. We're only 6 weeks into the semester right now. It may grow, it may evolve, but also it's sort of not needed in the same way. Students aren't feeling, they're feeling anxious still, but not to the same level that they were before, so far anyhow. And so they're not using the general and the random, but they also have more ability to participate during class. So I think that's part of it. The seminars themselves are still working, and this is why I'll continue to keep Slack. So first of all, accessibility totally matters. And what we did was we found we became more accessible during the HyFlex semesters. We can't backtrack. I know a lot of people keep trying to do this return to normal, and it's awful. No, if you made things more accessible, why would you get rid of those things now? They're still needed. We're still, yeah. So anyhow, I do have a student this semester who is nonverbal, and I did not know that before the semester began. I could have a deaf student next semester. Each semester, I have who knows how many students that are on the spectrum. This written discussion and the ability to do things more on their own time has helped all of those students tremendously. In these types of seminars, I hear from more of my students than I would in the traditional seminar. I think part of that is because it really is more of an equalizer. While one person could speak out loud in class and really monopolize a discussion, they're only allowed to type so quickly, right? So they could still post a million messages if they wanted to, but everyone is able to kind of hop in and kind of interact with the pieces they want to interact with. Also allows for a lot of side discussions to happen that wouldn't happen in that shared physical space. So I do also allow the seminar to happen asynchronously. So it starts my 9 o'clock section, seminar starts 9 o'clock on that Monday morning, but it is open for 36 hours. So if a student needed more time to kind of work through their ideas, if they didn't get to the reading yet, and they know they need to before they participate, they still have time to pop in there and they can post things later. So I also have this because we're still in a pandemic, and I'm very aware that at any point we could get a worse variant and things could go back to remote instruction. And I don't want to have to triage things again. I want something that's going to play well in both spaces. I've also found that having this asynchronous means of participation means that my students feel like they can stay at home if they even have a sniffle. And I think that's very, very important. I missed class on Monday and we had a seminar, and you know what? Seminar went on without me because I wasn't needed. The space was set up. They were able to do it. We had done one before. So even though we couldn't find a sub for that class. I also like Slack because it is actually used in professional settings. It behaves more intuitively, links to what students and I wish to do with it without having to be broken in order to be used, which is how I often feel about a traditional CMS for writing and discussion courses. So I hope that students who go into a professional environment where Slack is then used also have more comfortability and are able to transfer that over. All right, so I know this sounds like a sales pitch. It's really not supposed to be. Slack is totally free to use. I do not have a professional account. I just use the basic account and it has more than enough for what I need. But you could also use Discord, which is also free. GroupMe and Remind and all sorts of things also have these same kind of capabilities if you want to adapt this type of pedagogy. I'm going to pause here. I have some tips in this on how to actually get started and use it within your own courses, but I want to pause to see if you have any questions because I know I went over a lot of stuff very quickly.
Nikki, this is like blowing my brains. I see like I just really wanted something like this because everything you're talking about, the accessibility piece, the part about students in class not really wanting to participate, but yet, and I've been trying to use Padlets, like in class, I'll be like, hey, text your summary or how you feel to the Padlet and the Padlet's on the screen. But this, like, they can do it wherever, they don't need, and I have no words.
Okay.
I'm so excited to like give it a whirl. The one question I did have, and it's more of a just like trying to get your feedback on it. So I teach a fully online 120. It's all about argument. The class is, focused on argument. And then I teach a hybrid. So it's half face-to-face, half not 120. So they're covering the same content. Would it, like, to have Slack and join those students together and have these kind of seminarish types of talks to one another, that it just kind of makes the class bigger and it might get a little out of hand. But I was wondering if that would be a cool way, because I'm always thinking about like how the online students, I typically have like maybe 20 of them and maybe 20 in class, and for them to find more people that have like common interests, because sometimes I do like online, I typically get a huge cohort of pre-nursing students. So
I'm
it's
going to stop you here because one of the things that they've cracked down on at my school is for FERPA reasons, we're technically not allowed to join any sections together because no one's allowed to know if a student is in a section.
okay.
So that's another reason that I keep all of my Slack spaces very separate. Pedagogically, I see a lot of reason to combine, but just ethically, legally, we're not really supposed to.
Okay, no, that helps.
Okay.
Well,
So,
I'm glad I didn't like take that idea and run with it, because yeah, you're right. That's probably better to keep them separate.
so yeah, and it just, again, FERPA's been really on their radar lately and they're cracking down. Because I used to have all my Blackboard sections together, which made life a whole lot easier. Now it's harder. All right, so there are a bunch of things that you may want to know if you're going to get into using Slack. And first one is that the icon that comes up for your Slack space is going to be whatever the first letter is, unless you change the picture. So I have multiple sections of 101. I make sure to name it, always starting with the section number or the time of the class, so that I can see at a glance which section I'm in instead of all of them being E for English 101. And then also I teach at SWIC, so I put SWIC in the name because I never know if other schools are going to be using this, and then if that naming convention will be stolen later on. You can keep your spaces forever, or I tend to delete them after the semester closes. I learned this one the hard way. When you create a space, it's going to ask you what you're working on. And if you put any answer in there at all, it's going to create a channel for it. So in this case, I can put seminar discussions and then bam, it's created that channel for me already. But don't put like writing papers, because then you're going to be stuck with a channel that can't be deleted. That's called writing papers. The general and the random channels are going to be created for you. The easiest way to get students into the space is to click on, in Slack, it says add teammates, and it's on the bottom menu on the left, and you'll have the option to create a link. I post that link in Blackboard, and I've also emailed it to students. That link stays good for 30 days, which is usually more than enough time to get students into the space and using it. And in the past, I've done individual invites, but Slack changed it to make it easier to just share the one link. If at all possible, encourage students to sign in with their Google account. It really saves a million hassles. Slack is just as easy to use as a free phone app as it is online. It looks just slightly different, but in a moment, I'm going to talk to you about projecting it in class. So some pedagogical how-tos: make very intentional decisions about what you introduce and when in the first week of class. I don't hit them with all the classroom technology at once. Because I use Google Drive, I start there and get them writing on day one. And then day two is just confirming everybody got into that space okay, before day three is when we're introducing Slack. Then when you're introducing Slack, you need to have a meaningful, relevant, ungraded activity for them to do on that first day. Not everyone's going to get in on the first day. So what I do is I project that stream in class so that even the students who didn't get in can see what's going on in the conversation that's happening. Honestly, a lot of times when students can't get in, it's because of dual factor authentication issues that just kind of slowed them down. Most of them are able to get in pretty easily. And then just having something, a discussion for them to participate in that first week that's totally no stakes is also very helpful. And in the classroom itself, I allow students to either use the browser version on the lab computers or to use their phones. I tell them use whichever one you're able to, type or thumbs more quickly. Use it consistently. Get students into Slack at least once a week for an activity that is central to the course. That's how you build rapport in there and also make sure they don't forget about it. I will warn you that grading is a bit of a hot mess because I literally have to pull Slack on my phone and have a little checklist on a printed roster where I'm checking off, okay, this person participated at least twice. Now, this is more complicated when you've got a student whose Google account name is not their name. So I gave the example Poe Dameron 42. Of all of my 60 101 students, I have to guess which one of them. So at first I have them send me a direct message so that I can look in my DMs and see, okay, this is this person. Encouraging your students to have a Google Drive account that is more professional and academic is a way to help with this. I just kind of leave it to whatever they want to use. That's fine. Okay. All right. That was all of my presentation. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so that I can kind of see the chat more easily. Okay, there was a lot of chat happening that I was missing out on. Questions, concerns, thoughts?
I do have a question, Nicole. So I have downloaded the app while you're talking.
Okay.
So jumping right in. So for each course, you would create a new Slack workspace. And
Yes.
that's what the course naming was that you were talking about.
Yes.
Gotcha. And then when it asks you what project you're working on, it's best to skip that unless you're ready to really commit to that channel.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I'm so excited for this because I'm teaching all asynchronous classes. I think maybe to get started, I would use it less formally, but I really appreciated all your tips about how to really make it a part, in the fabric of the course. But it's so hard to create a sense of community in these online classes. And I know my students feel disconnected, and so many of them did not intend to be online students. And so I just think this is really exciting. I don't usually get too excited about tech tools because I'm like, oh, this is the season for this, and who knows what next season will be. But this sounds awesome.
Oh, okay. So Jamie pointed out that Google seems to be creating something that's going to be their own version of Slack. I look forward to that.
It was something I had just noticed being available. Our school just moved to being a Google school. So our email and everything is now linked through Google. But I had tried playing around with Slack a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic, and I had some issues with students and being able to get connected. And I'm not really sure what I did wrong, but I'm wondering, I use Google like everything else in all like docs, everything in the classes. And I had noticed that they've got something called Spaces now, which used to be chat rooms, but I think it's set up where you can like hashtag and tag people and that kind of thing. So I didn't know if anybody had used that in the same way you're using Slack. So.
Well, I will tell you that my experience with Slack the first semester, it didn't have that easy button of sharing a link. You had to invite students by email. So that first semester was much harder to get students started because I had to collect their emails that they wanted to use for the account. They had to do some account creation. The second semester I did it, it was so much easier with that sharing of the link.
May have been what issue I had initially. I knew it was just hard to get people even on Slack, and I bet that's what happened with me in using it. So,
yeah.
But I love everything that you've presented, that this is a fantastic way to use it.
This feels like a conference, a virtual conference miracle. I don't usually follow finish ahead of time. I'm usually eating into other time, not with a lot of discussion space at the end.
What other tools are people using? Is anyone else using anything similar to this? One of my friends uses Discord. Sorry, Sybil.
No, it's okay. My boyfriend for their workplace, they use GroupMe, which Nikki brought up, and I think people, yeah. And he, every time I say, oh yeah, my technical students don't think they're ever going to write again. And he's like, all I do all day is write. And he is a production manager, but now he's a service manager. So, I mean, he's always on there having to, like check in with somebody who's doing a job or whatever. But they use GroupMe, and I tried it out on my phone, and this seems so much more intuitive than that one. I don't know why, but maybe I didn't play with it enough. And I did think that I just really want to get away from the LMS. I don't really want to be in Blackboard, like Nikki was saying. It's ugly to me. The discussions aren't even, like, we used to have the Pearson product called eCollege, and at least then the discussion boards were like, the threads were like in front of you. Blackboard, you have to like go to different, it's not intuitive, and it's ugly. I don't even, and like, I love the fact that they can like stuff. Like, I have noticed that with Pad, that they can like it with little hearts and stuff. And I do tend to do that. So there's a connector thing going on there within the students. So yeah, so I've seen GroupMe, and then I use Google Voice to have them be able to text me when they have questions, but that's one-on-one, and it's kind of like, so I have a Google number, so that way they don't have to know my number. I don't really necessarily know theirs, but that's definitely one-on-one, and it's not to the whole class. So I could still keep that for like, then when they want to have a private conversation with me, but this just seems like the perfect way to get away from the LMS and still can have that community, whether the class is a hybrid or fully online or whatever the hell. I just think this might be the thing I need.
I will tell you that Slack does allow for direct messages. So a student can send you individual messages, and you would be able to bypass the Google Voice option then. Personally, I'm a person that likes boundaries, and I've asked students not to use the DM to contact me, but they could DM other students for peer review groups and things like that, because I prefer them to reach out to me through email, because I said, I don't want the message to come through as a on my phone when I'm in the middle of binge watching Arrow or whatever, but I opt into checking email, right?
Right.
So they've been very respectful this semester, and I haven't had DM problems. but you could extend that as an option if you want students to be able to reach out to you in that way. I'll tell you about GroupMe as well. I'm on GroupMe for parenting reasons, and it allows one reaction, just the heart, and does not do threaded discussion.
Oh,
So I do regard Slack as being GroupMe on steroids in that regard, because there are multiple, more reactions than you could possibly use. And the discussions are very threaded.
awesome.
Students can also change their icon pictures in Slack, which makes it better than our basic Blackboard too.
Yeah.
So, I can see what they look like in real life without a mask on, if they choose.
Yeah, and see, when you're talking about having it on your phone, my boyfriend specifically said, look, the school's not paying for your iPhone. Take Outlook off your damn phone. And so I don't really want to talk to faculty that much. I put this in the chat. Like I got rid of Outlook off my phone just because I'm like, nobody needs to get a hold of me that badly. But with the Google Voice, I have no problem talking to students, and they haven't really abused. Like if I do get a notification at midnight, I turn off everything anyway. So I don't really, I just tell them, hey, if you're going to text me late, just realize you're not going to get a note until later. So I see what you're saying though. If your boundaries aren't set, you could get kind of in trouble with like having to respond all the time. But I'd much rather talk to them than my faculty members. No offense to them, because they're annoying. Like students are usually just wanting to know what's going on. Faculty don't read their email. So like whatever, but no, I appreciate I appreciate you separating out the differentiation of it all. So.
Well, thank you all for attending on this lovely Friday morning.
And
Thank
just so
you so
people
much.
know, Nikki already gave me her documents stored in our repository. So if anybody forgot like half the stuff she said, which I'm sure you didn't, but if you did, you can go look at it and remind yourselves.
Perfect. Thanks, Sybil.
I know I'm going to I'm gonna like download it and like have it on my laptop forever.
Great.
Stop,
Thanks,
Petra.
Nicole. I'm going to stop recording now.